Everybody, Scott Costa, publisher of TED Magazine. Thanks for joining me for another video podcast. We're also on audio. We're doing a series of podcasts and posts and blogs and things about hitting the reset button. Again, 2020, not a great year. So we really kind of hoping for this year to end soon and we can get on to 2021, put this one behind us. But there's some things we got to do, obviously, to improve ourselves. And Certified Master Life Coach Jill Farmer is going to join me on this podcast to talk about a bunch of what they call soft skills. I think they're real skills. It doesn't matter if you're managing other people, if you're not managing anybody, if you're managed by everybody, just some skills you really need to improve over what happened here in 2020 and to give yourself a better 2021. So I'm excited about the podcast and the things that she has to say. But before we get started, I got to tell you about our sponsor for this podcast, which is Encore Wire. Since 1989, Encore Wire has been committed to engineering, manufacturing, and delivering the highest quality American-made products with a complete line of copper and aluminum, residential, commercial, and industrial building wire. Encore has everything you need to get the job done right. Encore Wire's dedicated customer service and shipping teams ensure your order is filled, shipped, and delivered to you faster than anyone in the industry, so you can keep your job ahead of schedule and keep more money in your pocket. Visit EncoreWire.com, EncoreWire.com for more information or contact your local representative today. Now, enjoy my conversation on soft skills with Jill Farmer. Jill Farmer is back on the podcast. She's our Certified Master Life Coach, and we talked a little bit earlier about these, what we call soft skills. Jill and I have decided that they're really just skills. Kind of take us through that real quickly, Jill, in terms of, what was once, I guess, called a soft skill is now just skills to get you into and through 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I really think of them more as essential skills. And in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of research and science around the science of success. And a lot of these skills are attributes and things that we can strengthen, kind of like muscles that we strengthen, that we know are going to help our success and help if we're feeling, and they're going to really serve us, particularly around those times in life when there's plot twists, a la pandemic. These are a lot of these essential skills, as we will talk about them, are things that can really help you move through challenging situations and plot twists. And so I think they're really important for us to write them down, to assess ourselves and say, is this a strength of mine? And if it's not, what do I do to make it a strength and to get better at it?
Exactly. So we're doing this reset button thing, and Kathy Anderson, she's in our marketing department at NAD. She sent me the article from the San Francisco Gate, which had all these, kind of this list of some of the skills and ways that we can make sure that 2021 is better than 2020 and improving on these skills that we have. So we're going to go through them. Let's just jump right in. Start with number one, critical thinking. Jill, tell us, again, where we're at and how we can sharpen up that critical thinking skill.
Yeah, and what do we, people I find often confuse this. They think critical thinking means thinking critical thoughts about other people. And that's, in these times of coming out of all the political turmoil of 2020, thinking critical thoughts about other people is not something any of us need to strengthen or work on. We all got master's degrees on that. Critical thinking, as we're talking about it as an essential skill, is how can we make something better? Right? Yeah. And so it's looking at something and saying, okay, this is good. How do we make it better? Or how do we think about this issue from a variety of different perspectives so that we can fix it, improve it, enhance it? There's been a lot of really great information that's come out in the last couple of years on this concept of upstream thinking. And that is, in a nutshell, saying it's based on this story of these two guys look out and they're eating lunch, and then they see all of a sudden there's a baby in the river, and they go in and save the baby that's there. And then all of a sudden they look up and there's another baby in the river. And after all this time, and they're, so tired and nearly drowning, one of the guys leaves the other and he says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "I have to go up the river to figure out who the heck is throwing babies in the river." And that's upstream thinking, is this idea of we can't just keep saying, oh, well, this thing is happening when we do this at work or in our organization or in our lives, and we get this result. I wish we would get a different result. At some point, we got to go upstream, right? Because and figure out what needs to change the result. And a lot of times we forget to take personal responsibility for that. We wish, and so that upstream thinking is a way of applying that critical thinking, which is how do we make it better, and then how can we look upstream a little bit to think about how we adjust things to get a different result.
That is thanks for putting it that way. That really, clarifies it. I appreciate it. We got to talk about the next one, which is collaboration. And this is an interesting one to me because I think we all sort of had that, again, flash backward to March. We kind of all had that, okay, we're all in this together. We're all don't worry about it. We're going to do it. And then after a while, you're like, okay, I didn't sign up for this, starts to get a little bit more difficult of, my skill set is not this, and now this is what I'm doing on a regular basis. So collaboration is a big one. How do we, make sure that we continue down that path, into 2021 so that we continue to be successful?
Yeah. So you named one issue of the pandemic that had an effect on collaboration, which was people had to figure out how new skill sets and kind of felt like they were doing it on an island. Secondly, just the physical space changes a lot of this experienced, where we were not working in the office, full time with the same staff of people. Even though a lot of offices have reopened on some form, it's still not the same as it was in November of 2019 when we just kind of got up and went to work with the same group of people. And so that has made the ability to collaborate more challenging. And some people took that change in circumstance and said, well, I guess we can't collaborate. And what we're noticing is that people are feeling really, that has a negative effect on us. We have a certain part of us is wired to collaborate. We know from the data that when we do everything by ourselves and tell ourselves one of my favorite lies that is anti-productivity and happiness, which is, oh, it's just easier if I do it myself.
Yeah.
It's just easier if I do it myself lie. It only stands up for so long, because over time it isn't true. And we know that when we try to hold all the responsibility for ourselves and all the ideas and all the ways to solve problems and all the ways to think critically and to use upstream thinking, when we try to do that all in the vacuum of our own space and our own brain, it takes more effort. We have more fear, we have more frustration, and it burns us out faster. So it takes some effort truly to collaborate and to say to somebody else, hey, I need a thinking partner on this. Hey, I would love to brainstorm how we can work through this. Hey, I've broken this big mammoth project down into a series of meaningful, ridiculously easy steps. We've talked about that in previous conversations on this very podcast, as a way to tackle big things. Can I give you some of these ridiculously easy steps to offload them so that we can move and make progress faster? So, collaboration is just a really a big word for saying working together to make things more effective, easier, and meaningful.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think a lot of people got into that. It's just easier for me to do it myself. And then they do that, 15 times in a week. And the next thing you know, nobody's getting anything done. I mean, they're not getting anything accomplished, and they're not, again, working with others to get jobs completed. And so that's a good point. I'm glad you.
And then you start adding those extra, I call them sand in the backpack of resentment and, overwhelm and all that stuff. So yeah, it's true. Collaboration isn't quite as easy as it was when you could just holler across the hall at everybody in its own way. And it'll make you more nimble and more creative as you think of more ways to be intentionally collaborative as opposed to just accidentally collaborative. It's a good long-term skill to develop for a variety of different scenarios in your future.
Right. This next one is interesting too. Cross-cultural understanding, especially with people working from home. Everybody's home is a little bit different. Everybody's got different backgrounds and different things going on. And we've seen it. It continues now. A lot of people have their kids home from school, and you're trying to work and they're trying to go to school, and it's just crazy. And there's cultural differences, and you're not used to the things, in the office, it seems professional. It's like, we're working, now that we're doing this sort of in a different way and people are working from home, it's like, I got to understand a little bit more about how, Scott operates when he's in his house and not just when he's in his office. So do you see a lot of concern, I suppose, a lot of, how do I want to put it? Folks not really realizing the cross-cultural understanding of there's, people are different, especially when they're working in their homes.
Right. Cultural literacy in general is something that is just improving so much in business. And sometimes, than it has been in the past. And we still have a long way to go on that, because we tend to just think that the way that we do things, the way that we understand things, the way that we perceive things and do things is just we universalize it in our brains. We don't, that's how it should be done. That's the best way to do it. That's how everybody does it. And so this, I think you're exactly right. This massive plot twist of all of us working at home now has provided us with a fabulous laboratory to recognize that there is a pretty broad spectrum of the way things can be done, the way people work at their best. And so to me, the number one tool for learning and increasing your cultural literacy is curiosity. If you notice you're having a reaction because, I want the workday to start at 8:00, not 8:05, and I want everybody at their Zoom desk, but it's just to be curious and to ask questions. When does your, to the colleague or to the collaborator or to the person who's working for you, when are your ideal times where your brain is firing on all cylinders and you notice you can be in flow and get more work done, meaningful work done in less time? When you ask that question, you might get a totally different answer than what works for you. But when you have some open-mindedness around understanding about that works, that's a very tactical, practical benefit of opening up your mind around cross-cultural understanding and trying to expand your cultural literacy. And so a lot of times people think it's about pointing out differences, outside differences in the way we look, the way we live, eat, breathe. But when it comes to thinking about this as an essential skill as it relates to work performance and contentment and avoiding burnout, curiosity is really the best tool.
It's interesting. I'm going to ask about this one in a sort of a different way, because I wonder if we've, kind of shoved it under the rug a little bit, just in terms of, again, using sort of a normal year, it's like, oh, my son had his holiday, show at school. And then afterwards we went out to dinner, and then afterwards we ran into friends. And the next, we got home late. And so then the next morning you walk in the office, you're like, yeah, things are a little scattered, but I'll catch up. I think sometimes people are like, well, you're working from home. It should have been really easy for you to just get on a call at 8:00 in the morning and start working. And it's like, do you think we kind of take some of those things for granted because we're saying, well, you didn't have a commute, for lack of a better term? There's still an understanding of, I have things going on at home. I just try and bury them really deeply when I go into the office every day, as opposed to working from home.
Well, a lot of us have this cultural imprint of sort of the factory time clock still in our brains, even though the research has shown us for a long time that there's no magic to sitting at a desk for 8 hours in terms of productivity, that a lot of times people who are the quickest to be sitting at their desks and showing that they're productive actually are good at looking busy, but don't have any higher rates of actually producing stuff in places that's being tracked in productivity research. So it's okay if it makes you uncomfortable, if your preference and the way that you've been culturally indoctrinated is to have things on a much more regimented deal, to recognize I work best that way and I'm going to impose that on myself. And it's an opportunity to strengthen that muscle in you if you get curious. Now, if somebody else is truly just like avoiding doing stuff, everybody's smart, they know that. But to recognize that your imprint recognition is that people need to be sitting in their desk for X number of hours may or may not be directly correlated to the output of their productivity and what they're actually getting. And so I think this is one way that expanding that essential skill of cross-cultural understanding will help enhance productivity, teamwork, connection, collaboration. It has a positive effect on all kinds of these skills on this list.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to number 4 on the skills list that we can improve as we hit the reset button. This is a good one too, problem solving. Because here's the thing, like I don't know what the next problem is going to be. I mean, welcome to the pandemic. I mean, I think a lot of people look at each other, I certainly do, and say, hey, all right, what are we going to do about this one? It's like, nobody saw that coming. I mean, it's not even fair. So, there's sort of a skill to being ready to solve any problem that's going to come your way, and you don't know what the next one's going to be.
Yeah, there's a really good book that I've been reading called The Innovation Stack by Jim McKelvey, who was one of the founders of Square, right? Those little readers that we all have.
Yeah.
And he kind of looked at like, okay, people said, how did you make Square so wildly successful? And he looked at that, and then he looked at other models of other companies that had sort of wild success. And he noticed that a unifying sort of attribute of a lot of these companies is what he calls the innovation stack, which simply means you solve one problem, which means you create a new problem. So you need to stack on a solution to that. And it was so interesting because when you listen to him talk about, and this other huge problem showed up, it's not with this wailing and gnashing of teeth and isn't that terrible. It's more like, it's another puzzle to crack. It's almost like it's another video game level to get to use a different metaphor, to mix metaphors there. But I think that's a lot of us come from, again, this kind of old way of thinking is like, problems bad, avoid problems, not problems lead to new solutions, which lead to new insights, which lead to new innovations, which lead to new opportunities. And that's flipping things on the head for the way a lot of us were sort of ingrained and taught to believe, which is people who avoid problems are doing it right. And so I think that embracing tech has always been a good, a place for us to watch that model of embracing the challenge and embracing the challenges that stack up on the other challenges. And I love the work, again, based on the research that has just taken off and is so well done in the last 20 years of people like Carol Dweck, who was kind of the person who founded that concept of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And growth mindset, and anybody who's had kids in school in the last 10 years, it's really been integrated in our education system, which I think is so great, because when you teach kids from the time they're little, that a problem is not some bad thing that you should have avoided if you were a better person that you label yourself as. A problem is an opportunity. Every obstacle is a chance to be able to put some hard work into it, and we can fix it. And so that growth mindset versus fixed mindset is really helpful to get better at. And her book, it's just simply called I think it's called Success, the Mindset of Success. Carol Dweck is an excellent kind of primer for getting ourselves ready to be in that better mindset, which makes us more successful people. It's not how we used to say somebody was smart or not smart, but then what happens if somebody has a challenge in their life and they're like, then they end up with imposter syndrome. I see that in physician clients and other execs I work with all the time. They're like, I thought I was the smart one, and now I've come across this problem I can't solve. Oops, something must be wrong with me. And they have this imposter syndrome instead of, interesting. That label, we're all have the ability to, with a growth mindset, to work our way around problems. We don't need to just stick with labels about what we are or aren't. That's not helpful to us, and it doesn't help us solve problems.
Good point. Let's move on to number 5 on the list of 8. Flexibility, which I think is a big one. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of put together flexibility and adaptability, which are kind of 5 and 6 on the list, because I think they come from the same thing, which is our brain's ability to work around stuff, which is that neuroplasticity. I think is the fancy word that describes it. But a lot, we have this thing that came up when we first. For instance, the pandemic came up, called the normalcy bias, which most of us experience. It's like, I just want to go back to the way things were. Yeah. We have this innate nature within us, that normalcy bias, which tells us the story that things were better when they were the way they were used to be. The good news is an even more powerful and effective and kind of amazing part of our brain is that neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to adapt and be flexible, to rewire itself, if we're really going to get technical, right? When things, when plot twists show up when we need to work around challenging things. And flexibility and adaptability are two attributes, two skills that the most successful people in the world tend to have higher levels of than the average Joe.
Right.
When we look at the success of people, and when it's been researched and studied, a lot of times what shows up is, there's, I was talking about this with a client once, and he said, I'm so glad you pointed this out, because I have a brother who is 18 months younger than me. We've lived exact same life. I look at every situation that doesn't go the way that I expected. I feel my feelings, and then I figure out how we can do something about it. He looks at those situations, feels like something has gone wrong, takes it personally, and either blames himself or blames somebody else, and has really not ever done anything outside of the world that we lived in. And I was like, that's such a good example of how we can be born in the same conditions, we can have some of these same attributes, but cultivating a bigger sense of flexibility, or a bigger strength in flexibility and adaptability, is a way to a bigger and better life.
I'm going to expand on this a little bit. You talked about rewiring the, kind of the thought process here. Let me follow up with that by saying, I think that I'm not saying I'm not one of those people, but it's like, can we just have a rule where every time, somebody drinks out of a green cup, these 4 things are going to happen? And it's like, but the rules have all been changed now because we're in a pandemic, and I don't know what the next thing, and those rules don't count anymore because things have changed so radically. And folks have a hard time, I think, rewiring out of, but remember 4 years ago this happened and we did that. It's like, that was so 4 years ago. And you've got to move, into the future, not in the past. So do you see a lot of that? And is there a way that you can, again, continue to sort of rewire that? Forget about the old rules. It's time to, be flexible, be adaptable.
Great point. Because a lot of us will perceive, when we self-report, we're like, yes, I'm very flexible and adaptable. And when we're comfortable, we are. When it's like, oh, I'm sorry, they don't have the steak. I need to have the lobster for dinner tonight. Okay, right. But when it's, oh no, I wanted to go on my dream family vacation with my parents for their 50th anniversary and it got canceled, then that's the pressurized situation where we really got to test our mettle on our ability to be, or the income source that I was counting on for my year of making money this year has suddenly dried up. Like, that's when when the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And so the biggest one thing that you can do to increase your ability to strengthen your capacity for your brain rewiring itself to be more flexible and adapt itself, is to be willing to sit in discomfort. And you have to suffer miserably, but it is saying, okay, I love the neural pathways, like the familiar. We want the same marble to follow the same pathway, and that's not going to happen.
Right.
When we're creating a whole new pathway with a whole new pandemic. And so it's like, oh, that feels uncomfortable to me. That's okay. That's my neurobiological system trying to keep me safe and take me back to what's familiar. But I actually have this really good capability in my brain to adapt and to be flexible, and to make something happen here that can be even better than it was before. That capacity is there. We just got to sit in some discomfort with that, just like you do when you first start lifting weights walking hills when you haven't for a while. You're going to have some muscle soreness for a minute, and that's okay. Right.
So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit then and talk about the other skill, which is comfort with ambiguity, which is we don't know I'm having a hard time getting through today. God only knows about tomorrow, and you talked about, again, you kind of want that marble to go in the same direction, every single time. So how do we kind of settle in with the fact that the future is uncertain?
Yeah. There's something that I learned about when I was first learning about this work, and before I started working in it. It's called liminal phases. And liminal phases are kind of in between phases in life where we're not one thing, but we're not the other. So for instance, if you get engaged, you're no longer really single, but you're not married yet, right? But you're kind of in an in-between phase that's a lot more like being married than being single, but it's still not like being married yet, right? When somebody is pregnant, right? They're no longer not a mom, or you're no longer not a parent in a couple, but you're not there. And we tend to be wildly uncomfortable with liminal phases. But the thing to remember about them is all of those phases are the transition between one thing and what's next. And so when we can remember that we're moving towards something that could be at worst different, at best better, than when I think that's one of the ways that we help with that. And the other that kind of correlated between flexibility, adaptability, comfort with ambiguity, the other attribute that is a really good essential skill is resilience.
Yeah. That's number 8.
Resilience, comes in with that being comfortable with that discomfort of the ambiguity that comes from that strengthening our ability to be flexible. And resilience, the thing that helps us there is grit. It can be, a lot of people associate grit with suffering and doing something that is, and I understand that, like there's, we look back at situations where people were really, abused, and then we say, well, they just had grit. But if we can cultivate that strength within us, we all have some grit in there. A lot of times we've just forgotten that it's like, what do I need today? I need a little grit to get me through. That helps us a lot with that resilience and bouncing back, because it's easy to give up when we feel like we're down. When something has happened, it's easy to give up. We need the resilience the bounce back gets fueled very effectively by a little bit of grit.
That's great. And again, 8, we're not going to call them soft skills. They're going to call them real skills to hit the reset button, get you through to 2021. I really appreciate you going through all of those, and again, showing people what they really mean and explaining, what it's going to take to have a better year next year. Jill Farmer, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you going through all this stuff with me.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to add just one tiny one in 15 seconds here. And that's when I think for communication and collaboration in this world of kind of where we've been divided a lot is empathy, right? A lot of times people think empathy sounds like a weak skill. Empathy is simply looking at a situation through somebody else's perspective. We get it confused with sympathy, which is pity, which is pretty unhelpful in a lot of cases, but empathy is one of those things that can really help with that cross-cultural understanding, with problem solving, just thinking about if I put on the lens and get behind Scott's eyes right now as he's looking at this situation, how might he be seeing it, and how can that help us create something better? And I think that's one of those, it can be underrated, but man, it can be a powerful essential skill to develop as well.
I agree. Jill Farmer, thank you for joining me on the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast. Always a great conversation. Again, a huge thanks to Jill Farmer, past colleague of mine, and I've known her for years and years, and she's a great interview and great insight on, again, these soft skills, these real skills that you're going to need to have a better 2021. Keep following us at TED Magazine, NEAD.org. We're working together on this reset button campaign, and I want to make sure that everybody has a better 2021 than this 2020 thing we got going on. And again, a huge shout out to our sponsor for this podcast, Encore Wire, eliminating the hassle of ordering from multiple suppliers and enjoy the convenience of one-stop shopping with Encore Wire. Encore Wire offers a complete line of copper and aluminum building wire, including THHN, THWN2, XHHW2, USE2 in all colors and sizes, bare copper, aluminum, MC cable, tray cable, NMB, UFB, MTW, and flexible conduit with premier labor-saving solutions, full-service cutting and paralleling, and industry-leading delivery times. Encore Wire has you covered. Visit encorewire.com, ENCOREWIRE.com for more information, or contact your local representative today. And just a reminder, I'm working here today in the home office. I'm going to be here for a little bit. If you need to contact me, hit me up on email only, because I'm not answering my desk phone in the office these days. Email scosta, SCOSTA at NEAD.org. Send me your email. Send me your thoughts. I'd love to get back to you. We can go back and forth. We're going to have a better 2021 than 2020 because we're going to hit that reset button. Thanks, everybody, for watching the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast.